me, Chaim, 30. Senior designer at a perfectly forgettable tech firm. The kind that builds tools for businesses and never trends on Twitter. It's steady money and work I actually know how to do. I spend my days shaping interfaces that don't fight back, where things land where they should, and users don't feel the urge to smash their monitor. For a long time, my days ran on repeat. Wake up, commute, sit in my Herman Miller chair, put on my headphones, and push pixels around in Figma until the day ends. The office vibe was always pretty chill. We were a team of professionals. Nobody was best friends, but everyone was respectful. We had a running joke about how bad the coffee from the machine was. Our old manager was a guy named Dave. He was in his late 50s, counting the days to retirement. Dave's management style was, as long as the work gets done and the client is happy, I don't care what you do. It was perfect. No drama, no politics, just work. We had our routines, nerdy arguments about fonts, debates over the best framework for a new feature, sharing links to cool design articles. It was a quiet, productive ecosystem. I was one of the go-to guys for the really tricky UI/UX problems. When a workflow was confusing or a feature was tanking in user testing, the project would land on my desk. I enjoyed the puzzle, untangling the mess and making it simple. It earned me a lot of quiet respect from the developers and other designers. They knew if I designed it, it would make sense and it would work. That's all I ever wanted, to be known for doing good work. Then, about a year ago, Dave finally retired. He sent a company-wide email with a picture of him holding a giant fish. And that was that. For a few weeks, we were adrift. The director, a very corporate guy from the top floor who we rarely saw, acted as our interim manager. He didn't understand what we did, so he just approved our timesheets and left us alone. It was bliss. Then the announcement came. We were getting a new department head. Her name was Bridget. Her profile on the company intranet was a wall of text filled with corporate buzzwords. Synergizing cross-functional teams, cultivating inclusive digital paradigms, driving impactful innovation. It sounded like she was generated by an AI that had only ever read LinkedIn posts. The first day she arrived, the whole atmosphere in the office shifted. She walked in with a strained, too-wide smile. She gathered us all in the conference room for an informal meet and greet. She spent 30 minutes talking about her vision, not about our products or our clients or our deadlines, about culture. She wanted to build a brave space where everyone felt psychologically safe. We all just nodded along, wanting to get back to our desks. This was just standard corporate fluff you have to endure. But it wasn't just talk. The next Monday, the weirdness began. An email arrived in our inboxes. Subject: our communication commitment. It was a long manifesto about avoiding problematic language in the workplace. Words like guys when addressing a group were now discouraged. The term man-hours was forbidden. It was a little strange, but whatever. Corporate policy. We could adapt. Then she started holding mandatory weekly culture check-in meetings. An hour every Friday afternoon, which used to be our most productive time, was now dedicated to sitting in a circle and sharing our feelings about the work week. Most of us had nothing to share. We just wanted to finish our work and start the weekend. The meetings were incredibly awkward. Long silences broken only by Bridget trying to prompt people for an emotional response. Chaim, how did the feedback on the dashboard mock-ups make you feel? I didn't know how to answer that. It felt constructive. The feedback was good. I'll make the changes. She'd get a disappointed look, like I'd failed a test. This is when Mila started to change. Mila was another designer on the team. She'd been there for a couple of years. She was okay at her job. Not great, not terrible. Mostly kept to herself. But after Bridget arrived, it was like a switch flipped in her brain. She suddenly became Bridget's #1 disciple. In the check-in meetings, Mila always had something to share. She would talk about how a developer's direct feedback felt abrasive and disruptive to her creative flow. She'd praise Bridget for creating a space where she could finally voice her truth. It was bizarre. We'd all gotten the same feedback from the same developer for years. He was just a blunt German guy who cared about efficiency. There was nothing personal in it. Mila started echoing Bridget's corporate jargon. She started forwarding articles about emotional labor in the workplace, and the patriarchal structures of UI design. I didn't even know that was a thing. Bridget absolutely loved it. She would praise Mila in front of everyone for her bravery and vulnerability. Soon, Mila became the unofficial thought police of the department. If someone made an offhand joke, Mila would make a point of saying, "I'm not sure that joke is inclusive." The chill, easygoing vibe of the office was evaporating. People stopped joking around the coffee machine. The nerdy debates about fonts died down. Everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Productivity started to dip. Projects that used to take 2 weeks were now stretching into a month. Why? Because every decision had to be filtered through a new lens of feelings and potential offenses. A simple design choice, like using the color blue for a button, would spiral into a long discussion led by Bridget about the gendered implications of color theory. It was exhausting. My strategy was to just become invisible. Headphones on, head down, deliver top-tier work on time. Give her no reason to focus her attention on me. For a few months, it actually worked. I was the quiet, reliable workhorse. My designs were clean, they tested well, and I never missed a deadline. Bridget mostly left me alone because she couldn't find any fault in my actual output. The calm didn't last. The company was gearing up for its biggest product launch in years. We'll call it Project Odyssey. It was a massive undertaking, a complete overhaul of our flagship software. My role was crucial. I was responsible for designing the core user interface and establishing the entire visual language for the new platform. It was a huge amount of pressure, but I was in the zone. I spent months doing research, building prototypes, and running user tests. The whole team was working hard. Even with Bridget's weird meetings, the importance of this project made everyone focus. We were making great progress. My designs were getting rave reviews from the internal stakeholders and our beta testers. The director was pleased. Everything was on track. And then Bridget decided she wanted to be more hands-on with the creative direction. She called a mandatory design review for the main dashboard, the most critical screen in the entire application. She told me she had some ideas and that she had whipped up a little something herself. My stomach sank. A manager with a design degree from 20 years ago, who hasn't been in the software for a day, is the most dangerous thing in the tech world. But I kept my cool. Sure, looking forward to seeing it. The day of the meeting, the whole team filed into the big conference room. Bridget was beaming. She had her laptop connected to the giant screen. She starts her presentation with a 10-minute preamble about disrupting user expectations and creating an emotionally resonant experience. Then she shows us her design. It was pretty. I'll give her that. It looked like something you'd see on a curated design portfolio site. Lots of white space, trendy thin fonts, and a muted artistic color palette. But as a functional user interface for a complex piece of software, it was a complete catastrophe, an absolute nightmare. My mind immediately started cataloging the problems. The font she used was a beautiful, wispy sans serif, but it was almost unreadable at a normal body text size. The color contrast was a joke, light gray text on a slightly less light gray background. Our software had to comply with web accessibility standards. Her design would fail catastrophically. People with visual impairments wouldn't be able to use it at all. The clickable elements, like buttons and links, had no clear indicators, no borders, no shadows. They were just words floating in space. A user would have no idea what was a button and what was just a label. The core navigation was hidden behind a vague icon that didn't follow any established pattern. You'd have to guess where to click to find the most important features. It was a textbook example of form over function. Beautiful and utterly useless. Bridget finished her presentation. "So, thoughts?" she said, looking around the room with that wide, expectant smile. There was a long, painful silence. Everyone was looking at me. I was the lead on this. If I didn't say anything, we would be forced to build this monstrosity. The project would fail. I took a breath. I decided to be as professional and objective as possible. No emotion, no opinion, just facts. "The aesthetic is very clean, Bridget," I started, trying to be diplomatic. "However, I have some concerns about usability and accessibility." I pointed to the screen. First, the body text contrast ratio is 1.5 to 1. The legal requirement for accessibility is 4.5 to 1, so we'll need to darken the text considerably. Second, the primary call to action buttons lack clear affordance. User testing shows that buttons without clear boundaries or shadows result in a significant drop in click-through rates. We should probably add a subtle container to them. Third, the navigation icon is non-standard. Hiding the main menu like that could be confusing for our user base, who are accustomed to more traditional patterns. Perhaps we could consider a visible top navigation bar instead. I kept my tone even and helpful. I was talking about the design, not about her. I was doing my job, my exact job. I was trying to save the project. Bridget's smile vanished. It didn't just fade, it snapped off her face. Her eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room dropped by 10 degrees. "So, what you're saying," she said, her voice dripping with ice, "is that you don't like it." I was taken aback. "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just pointing out some potential issues based on industry best practices and accessibility laws. We can easily fix them." That's when Mila chimed in, of course. "I have to say, Bridget, I felt that too," she said, looking at Bridget with a deeply concerned expression. The way Chaim just listed off all those problems felt very dismissive of the creative vision. It felt like he was trying to assert his dominance over the conversation. My brain just blue-screened. What in the world was she talking about? I looked around at my other colleagues. They were all staring at the table, refusing to make eye contact. They knew this was insane, but they were too scared to speak up. Bridget nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on me. "Thank you for sharing that, Mila. That's a very valid feeling." She turned her full attention back to me. "Chaim, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about when I discuss male toxicity in the tech space." The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. "You didn't offer collaborative suggestions. You came in with a list of criticisms, using technical jargon to shut down a creative idea. You were not trying to help. You were trying to show that you knew better." It was a classic case of mansplaining. I was speechless. I literally could not form words. I had just given standard professional design feedback, the kind of feedback I had given and received hundreds of times in my career. But she had twisted it into a personal attack, an act of aggression, a crime. The meeting was over. She just shut her laptop and said, "We'll revisit this later." The team shuffled out of the room in complete silence. No one looked at me. I went back to my desk, my head spinning. I felt like I was in a nightmare. An hour later, I got an email from her. Subject, urgent meeting. Just me and her, in her office, in 10 minutes. I walked to her glass-walled office like a man walking to the gallows. Mila was in there with her, standing by her side like a loyal bodyguard. That's when I knew this was going to be bad. I sat down. Bridget stared at me from across her desk. "I'm not going to beat around the bush, Chaim. Your behavior in that meeting was unacceptable." She went on a long, rambling monologue. It was like she was reading from a script. She talked about how men in the workplace feel entitled to dominate conversations. She mentioned how my aggressive critique was a symptom of a larger, patriarchal system that seeks to silence female voices. She said I had created a hostile environment and had undermined her authority as a manager in front of the entire team. Mila just stood there, nodding at every point Bridget made, her arms crossed. I tried to defend myself. "Bridget, I was just giving technical feedback. It had nothing to do with gender. The contrast ratios are an objective fact. It's a legal requirement." She held up a hand to silence me. "This is not about facts, Chaim. It's about respect. It's about the safety and well-being of this team, and your actions made your colleagues, particularly the women on this team, feel unsafe." She gestured towards Mila, who put on her best "I'm a victim" face. I knew right then that logic was useless. I had entered a bizarro world where facts didn't matter. Only her narrative mattered. Then she delivered the final blow. "This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. We need to have a restorative justice process." I had no idea what that meant. "I need you to demonstrate that you understand the gravity of your actions. I need you to send an apology to the entire design and development team." My heart stopped. "You want me to apologize? For what? For doing my job?" Her expression was cold as stone. "You will apologize for your dismissive and aggressive tone. You will acknowledge that your method of feedback was inappropriate and created a hostile atmosphere. You will commit to being a better, more considerate ally in the future. She wasn't asking, she was telling. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a list of bullet points she wanted me to include in the email. It was a forced confession, a script for my own ritual humiliation. I just stared at the paper. I couldn't believe this was real. If I don't see that apology in my inbox with the entire team CC'd by 5 p.m. today, we will be escalating this to HR as a formal conduct violation. And I can assure you, with my testimony and Mila's, it will not go well for you. It will go in your permanent file. Think about your career, Chaim. It was a threat, plain and simple. Obey and humiliate yourself, or resist and be branded as a toxic problem employee, a mark that would follow me forever. She thought she had me trapped. She gave me that smug, confident smile again. The one that said, "I've won." I stood up, took the piece of paper, and walked out of her office without saying another word. I sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking slightly. I could feel the eyes of the entire office on me. Everyone knew what had just happened. They were all watching, waiting to see what I would do, waiting for the email to land in their inbox. The email where I would grovel and admit to crimes I didn't commit. I looked at the clock on my computer screen. It was 3:30 p.m., and I had until 5 p.m. to decide. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at my monitor. The cursor blinked at me from a blank document, taunting me. My mind was racing, replaying the conversations from the last few hours over and over again. Every scenario I ran through ended in a bad place. If I write the apology, I surrender my dignity. I would be admitting to something I didn't do. I'd be validating her insane, manipulative narrative. Every time she wanted to assert her power in the future, she would have this victory to point to. I would become her poster boy for reformed masculinity, a tamed animal she could parade around. The thought made my stomach turn. Mila would be insufferable. Her smugness would reach critical levels. My colleagues would lose all respect for me. They would see me as a coward who caved to a bully. Our quiet professional relationships would be replaced by a new dynamic of pity and contempt. And what would stop Bridget from doing this again? The next time I gave professional feedback, would it be another incident? I'd have to walk on eggshells for the rest of my time at this company, filtering every professional opinion through her hypersensitive ideological lens. My ability to do my job effectively would be gone. I would just be a yes man. So sending the apology was out of the question. It was a slow professional death. But what was the alternative? If I refused, she would make good on her threat. She'd march straight to HR with Mila as her star witness. It would be her word, the word of a female manager, and her female witness against mine. I had no illusions about how that would play out in a modern corporate HR department. They are not courts of law, they are departments of risk management. A male employee being accused of toxic behavior and mansplaining by a female manager is a massive liability. The easiest way to make that liability go away is to get rid of the male employee. There would be a sham investigation. They'd interview people. My colleagues, terrified of becoming Bridget's next target, would give vague, non-committal answers. They wouldn't lie to hurt me, but they wouldn't risk their own jobs to help me either. I couldn't blame them. The final report would be a mess of corporate jargon that essentially found me guilty. I would get a formal warning placed in my file. Or worse, I'd be fired for cause. That mark on my record would be a red flag for any future employer. Doesn't work well with others. Issues with female leadership. Bridget knew this. That was the power of her threat. She had engineered a situation where my only two options were humiliation or career suicide. I felt a profound sense of helplessness. The system was rigged, the very thing I had built my entire career on, my expertise, my professionalism, my objective and rational approach to work, was being used as a weapon against me. It felt deeply, fundamentally unfair. I looked around the office. Everyone was pretending to work, but I could feel the tension. I saw one of the junior developers, a young kid fresh out of college, glance over at me with a look of genuine fear in his eyes. He was seeing his own future. He was learning today's lesson. Keep your mouth shut, no matter how right you are, or the machine will crush you. And that's when something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. If I let her win, I was teaching that junior developer and everyone else in that room that this was normal, that this is just how things are. I was validating Bridget's toxic, power-hungry worldview. I suddenly realized there was a third option. She had forced me to play a game where every move was a losing one. The only winning move was not to play. I looked at the piece of paper she had given me, the list of demands for my apology. I slowly, deliberately, crumpled it into a tight ball and tossed it into the recycling bin under my desk. It made a very satisfying thud. I opened a new document, but it wasn't an email. It was a resignation letter. It was short and to the point. Please accept this as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as senior designer, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunities you have provided. Sincerely, Chaim. No emotion, no explanation, just a clean professional break. I attached it to a new email. The recipient was not Bridget. The recipient was the director. The guy on the top floor, the one who only cared about results. I put Bridget's name in the CC field. I hovered my mouse over the send button for a second. This was it. No going back. I was walking away from a stable, well-paying job with nothing else lined up. It was a huge risk, but the feeling of taking back control was intoxicating. I clicked send. A wave of relief washed over me. I felt lighter than I had in months. I didn't wait for a response. I minimized the email window, locked my computer, and stood up. I grabbed the empty cardboard box I kept under my desk for old files. I started to pack my personal belongings, my favorite coffee mug, the small plant I had somehow kept alive for 3 years, the worn-out design theory books from my shelf. The office was dead silent now. The sound of me placing items in my box seemed to echo through the entire floor. I could see the reflection of Bridget in her glass office. She was standing up, staring at her monitor, probably reading the email I had just sent. Her mouth was a thin, hard line. Mila was standing next to her, looking confused. Bridget burst out of her office and marched towards my desk. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. I didn't look at her. I just continued packing. "I'm resigning," I said calmly. "You can't just resign. We have a process. You have to give 2 weeks' notice." "I'm resigning effective immediately," I repeated, placing a stack of notebooks into the box. She was sputtering, losing her composure. This was not part of her plan. I had refused to play my assigned role of the penitent male. I had flipped the whole game board over. "This is incredibly unprofessional. You're abandoning a critical project. You're letting down the entire team." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She was lecturing me on professionalism after trying to blackmail me into a forced confession. I finally stopped packing and looked up at her. I didn't say anything. I just met her gaze. There was no anger in my eyes, no fear, just a quiet finality. She saw in that moment that she had no power over me anymore. Her threats were meaningless. Her entire system of control was based on people being afraid of losing their jobs. I had just taken that fear off the table. She had nothing left. She opened her mouth to say something else, but no words came out. Just then, the oldest developer on our team, a quiet guy named Kevin, who had been with the company for 20 years, got up from his desk. He walked over to me, completely ignoring Bridget. He stuck out his hand. "Good luck, Chaim. It was a pleasure working with you." I shook his hand. "You too, Kevin." It was like a dam had broken. After Kevin, another developer got up and did the same. Then one of the female QA testers. Then another designer. One by one, a line formed at my desk. My colleagues, who had been too afraid to speak up in the meeting, were now speaking with their actions. They walked right past their furious manager to shake my hand, to wish me luck, to show their solidarity. Some just gave a solemn nod. Others whispered thank you or you did the right thing. Bridget just stood there, frozen, as her entire team filed past her to pay their respects to the man she had just tried to destroy. The public humiliation she had planned for me was now happening to her. It was a silent, organized rebellion, and she was the target. Mila was hiding behind her monitor, pretending to be intensely focused on her work. I finished packing my box. It wasn't very heavy. As I picked it up and started my final walk towards the exit, a sound started from the far corner of the office. It was a slow, deliberate clap. Then another person joined in. And another. Within seconds, the entire open plan office was filled with the sound of applause. It wasn't a celebratory, joyful sound. It was rhythmic, defiant, and deeply respectful. It was the sound of a silent majority finding their voice. They were clapping for me. They were clapping because I had done what they all wished they had the courage to do. I walked through the aisle of my applauding colleagues, my box in my arms. I didn't look at Bridget or Mila. I didn't need to. I just nodded to the team, walked out the main doors, and never looked back. The next few weeks were a blur. I took some time off to decompress. I went hiking. I updated my portfolio. I started sending out applications, feeling a little nervous about the gap in my employment. Then, my phone started buzzing. It was messages from my old colleagues. The story of what happened after I left came in bits and pieces. Apparently, my departure created chaos. Project Odyssey, the massive project that my designs were the backbone of, ground to a complete halt. I was the only one who understood the whole complex system and had all the master files. Bridget, in a panic, tried to force the team to move forward using her pretty but useless mock-ups. The developers, now emboldened by my exit, openly told her it was technically impossible. They explained in excruciating detail all the accessibility and usability problems I had originally pointed out. She had no answer. Her authority was completely shot. The team, having found their spine, began a campaign of malicious compliance. They did exactly what Bridget told them to do, and nothing more. When she gave vague instructions, they implemented them vaguely, leading to terrible results. When she demanded they work faster, they produced buggy, rushed work, citing her aggressive deadlines. Productivity plummeted. Deadlines for Project Odyssey were missed, then missed again. Mila tried to act as Bridget's enforcer, reporting on everyone's bad attitude. But no one cared anymore. They treated her like she was invisible. She ate lunch alone. No one invited her to coffee breaks. She was an outcast. The director, seeing his pet project turning into a flaming dumpster fire, finally came down from his ivory tower to see what was going on. He saw the collapsing timelines, the abysmal team morale, and the complete lack of progress. He had a meeting with Bridget. No one knows what was said, but the next day her desk was empty. She was fired for failure to meet project goals. The news spread through my old team's group chat like wildfire. There was a flood of celebratory memes. About a week after that, I got a call from an unknown number. It was the director. His voice was awkward, strained. He was clearly uncomfortable. He started with some small talk, then got to the point. "Listen, Cham, about what happened a few weeks ago. I believe there was a significant misunderstanding, a failure of management." He was trying so hard not to admit any fault. "Bridget is no longer with the company," he said, as if this was some great revelation. "We valued your work here. The team respected you. We want to make things right. We would like to offer you your job back." He paused, clearly expecting me to be grateful. "In fact," he continued, "we'd like to offer you the position of lead designer, with a significant pay increase, of course." I let him hang in the silence for a few long seconds. I savored the moment. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice calm and steady. "But I'm afraid I'll have to decline." "Oh," he said, clearly surprised. "Have you found another position already?" "As a matter of fact, I have," I said. "I start next Monday as the new art director at," and I named their biggest and most respected competitor. The salary they offered was substantially higher. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear him doing the math in his head, calculating the monumental amount of money his company had just lost. The cost of hiring a replacement for me, the cost of the project delays, and now the cost of me taking my talents to their chief rival, all because one manager couldn't handle professional feedback. "I see," he finally managed to say. "Well, good luck, Chaim." I said thank you, and I ended the call. I was sitting in the home office of my apartment, looking at the signed offer letter on my desk. They hadn't just offered me a better title and more money. During the interviews, they had praised my portfolio, admired my methodical approach, and told me they were looking for a leader who valued functional, user-centric design above all else. They were offering me not just a job, but respect. And in that moment, I realized the truth. When you refuse to play a rigged game, you don't lose. You change the game entirely.